a diversity, equity, inclusion, and awareness consultant and ally. She's certified facilitator in cultural intelligence, unconscious bias, and intercultural dialogue. She's an Oklahoma State alum. She's got over 15 years experience handling and leading diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts at Oklahoma State University and the College of Engineering. Those efforts were recently recognized and awarded by the American Society for Engineering Education in 2019 and 2020. And I will also personally add that every time I would run into Yokolanda in the hall, it was just a bright spot in my day. Yokolanda, I'm handing it over to you.
Thank you so much for that warm welcome, Terry. I'm going to share my screen. Maybe I need permission to share my screen.
Right now.
Thank you so much.
There you go.
Hopefully you all can see that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, my name is Yokolanda Speight, and today I'd like to talk to you about creating belonging in our communities. So a little bit about me. I go by Yoko for short. It's just easier for people to remember and to say. And so a little bit of background on my name. I get so many questions. That's it. So my name, Yokolanda, was something that my parents wanted to come up with. My mother is Hispanic and Black. My father is Korean and Black. And they wanted to try to combine both of their cultures. And in doing so, they came up with Yokolanda. My mother comes from a big family. And she had a number of relatives that were like, since I was the first grandchild, wanted to be named after them. So my mother, being creative, decided to take 9 letters from 9 individuals' names and came up with Yokolanda. And I'm not at all about, bitter of having taken so long to learn how to spell that. And then my siblings that followed me got simple names like Melissa, Carla, and Joshua. So, but anyways, I've grown to love my name. So that's it. But there's a little bit of background about me. As Terry said, I'm an OSU alum from the Spears School of Business. 15 years leading diversity, equity, inclusion for the College of Engineering, Architecture, and Technology, and then also assisting organizations with freelance consulting. And so my background on certification facilitator in cultural intelligence, unconscious bias, and intercultural dialogue. What basically that means is that I actually help people to actually be equipped to have conversations with people of different ethnicities, backgrounds, actually going and adapting in different cultures if they're going on business trips, or in student cases, that's going and doing study abroad. Also, that's that we all have biases. So I actually help people to take more time to be cognitive and recognize their actual unconscious bias. So what shapes us? There are so many things that shape us, from family to culture, our environments, of course, religion, society. Those are all beautiful things. I can tell you, for me, I was raised by a single mom. My parents divorced when I was very young. And of course, my parents went on to remarry, but my mother, being a single mother, raising me and my brother, that's it. I saw her go through college of, getting her bachelor's, getting her master's. My mother was actually a first-generation college student in her family. And that's it, but she was very adamant about getting her degree, and and making a better life, not only for herself, but for us as well. And so later on, my mother actually went on to get her PhD at Oklahoma State University, and and went on to work at Louisiana State University, Lafayette. That's where she is faculty. And that was something that always stuck with me, watching my mother go through doing her research, which happened to have been on the misrepresentation of Native American literature. And so going with her to tribes, actually going with her to, not only write her research, but then she's having me proofread it. And so that was something that stuck with me and was very adamant in me getting my degree, and of course, supporting my children and doing that as well. So that's it. To begin with belonging, that's it. How can you have belonging without taking the time to actually see what would life look like without belonging? We are all, very community-based. I believe that, you cannot have, that's it, go about life on your own. We are actually made for connection. But to look at what life would look like without it, we have to start by looking at what would our communities look like. Our communities would be weakened. That's what we'd have weak structures. That's what we'd actually see our community trust, going down. We'd see productivity, whether that was in an organization or whatever type of structure that is. We'd see a decrease in productivity, employee turnover. Of course, we'd also see that's a high number of sick days if there was an organization that did not have that sense of belonging. And then, of course, we look at our bottom line. Our bottom line is that we would not see the profit margins that we're wanting to see, nor would we have the innovation or competitive edge against our competitors. So I'd like to take a moment. This is something I love to do, interactions throughout my presentation. So I want you to know this is a safe place. And so I would love for you guys to give me some of your feedback. So when did you first become aware of your race or your gender? Would anyone mind sharing? That's it, just so we could have a little bit of conversation for a moment, and then I will go back to resharing. When did did anyone first become aware of their gender? What was that look like for you? Maybe think back, as a childhood experience, something with a friend, or your ethnicity with a friend, when you became aware that that you're of your race?
So, okay, I'll take a shot at this.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
I'm leaning back in the ladder and possibly letting go here. I grew up in Ardmore, and in the early 60s, schools were segregated. And about the 6th or 7th grade, they decided to integrate Ardmore schools. Or I think I was in junior high. And so they brought 2 students from the black school to my school. And that was the first time I'd really, Ardmore is not a particularly, there's not a particularly large black population there. And that just seems so strange to me. Is like, what's the big deal? And my dad could explain what the big deal was, and I won't go into that one, but that was the first time I began to realize, okay, there's a potential difference here. So that was my experience.
Thank you, Tim. Do you mind expanding on how it made you feel seeing those students come in your school?
I didn't understand the big deal about it. Some folks really made a big deal, but I just didn't understand the big deal at the time. And okay. I say at the time, I didn't understand what was so what? It's 2 more kids come to school. But a lot of folks were not of the same thought pattern that I was.
Well, Tim, I thank you for being vulnerable and sharing. Would anyone else like to share?
Go ahead.
Thank you,
Richard. Sorry, I'm Catholic, and I grew up in a small town that was dominantly Baptist. And even before school age, I was aware through my parents that Catholic was had a different community mindset than being Baptist, and that there were some expectations of Catholic kids that were not very pleasant, and our parents made us mindful that we needed to be good little people because we were Catholic.
And so, how did that make you feel as a young person?
Very aware that we are different, and that simply because we are different, there are negative aspects to that difference. And I guess you could say from a very early age then that created my mindset that we needed to be conscious of each other's differences and accepting and understanding.
Thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate you sharing. Richard?
Yeah, I remember I was born and reared in Lexington, Kentucky. And there were a great deal of white, black mixed all through that area. I remember, in fact, and I never knew it was an issue. We had friends that were African-American people who worked with us on the farm and were there all the time. And in fact, I remember in kindergarten, first grade it was, my girlfriend was a black student. And I loved her to death because she was so fast. And we would run around on the playground. So it just never was an issue until we were downtown in Lexington, and my mother was going into a building. She left me in the car, And she said, don't unlock the doors for anybody and watch out that people don't come out, especially a colored person. And I had no idea what a colored person was. I thought, what am I looking for? Am I going to see someone walk around the corner that's got red and blue and yellow checkered skin? I had no idea what a colored person was. And that was the first time I ever was confronted with that idea that Black people and white people are different from each other. And the way it made me feel was really confused, because I didn't have any way to integrate those concepts that my parents and grandparents had into the world in which I was living. It was all just one great society for me, and I enjoyed it. The only time I ever had a real conflict with a person of another place was when I was in college, played basketball at Oklahoma City University, and we had 2 Black players on the team with us at that time. And we argued and fought and yelled at each other all the time until we played ball, and they were always the same. But I remember only later thinking about that and trying to discern exactly what was going on. And I think it was really not so much racial as it was societal. The young man on our team that played ball was from Chicago, inner city Chicago, and that was a whole different world than rural Kentucky. And we just clashed, and I thought it was because he was Black and I was white. Only later did I realize I really thought it was more of a cultural difference. So those are just some of the experiences I had, and all of it led to a bit of confusion as to why we weren't, just one people, one group, and getting along really well. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's my earliest experience.
Thank you, Richard. I appreciate you sharing that. Anyone else want to share? Okay. Oh, somebody about to.
Yoko?
Yes.
Where did you grow up? What high school? Where'd you go to high school?
Well, I started in Pawnee. That's where my grandmother lived. I spent a lot of time with my grandmother. And then in Ponca City is where I ended up finishing up. But my early days, I actually went to school in California. So right outside San Francisco. So from those of you who were shared, I would like to ask the rest of you, how did it make you feel hearing what your peers just shared about their experiences? What, did you learn anything from them, from their experiences?
It reminded me of a situation too, where when my dad was in the military and we were on the base, and that everything that you guys have said reminded me of it, and I hadn't thought about it in years. But I had a little friend in 3rd grade, and he and we would walk together home, and he was a Black kid, and good, wonderful person. And I just remember my dad always said to me, and that prejudice is ignorance. And I always thought that was a good thing to say. But then on the other side of the coin, my mom said, you can't have Mike as your boyfriend because he's Black. And I'm in 3rd grade, and I just went, and I thought, well, you don't want your father to find out. And I thought, how awful. I mean, I really, even though I was a little kid, I thought that was terrible, and in a military situation, you've got ethnicities galore. I mean, it's just, everybody is on the same team, basically, so, but it reminded me, and it made me sad, to answer your question.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Deb.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have any thoughts about what was shared? Or learning something? Yes, Terry?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I grew up in Stillwater, and I guess it made me realize how fortunate we are, because I didn't ever experience segregation, although it had happened prior to that time. But Tim and I are very similar age, and so it's like, interesting. I think because of the university, we've always had many, many cultures. And so it just again made me realize how fortunate and maybe even sheltered I am. But then I will also, I don't want to go into a lot of detail, but I actually found out via some business travel to south of Atlanta that there are still places in this country that are very, very backwards. And I was completely bumfuddled. That's the best word I can come up with. It blew my mind that people still think like maybe the other parts of the US did in the 50s and 60s, but it actually still continues. So as a female engineer, I've been, I've had my own issues and my own challenges, all of those great things, but you see this and you just realize again that we still got a long ways to go. So we're so glad that we've got you.
Well, thank you, Terry.
Yep.
I can tell you from, experience, research, also my mother, when she took her position at Louisiana, there are still areas in small towns in the United States that are still segregated. I know my mother teaches multicultural, that's the courses in Louisiana, Lafayette, and one of her students came to college, and it was his first time ever being on campus seeing a person of color, of any other race. And so, of course, he ended up becoming best friends with an African-American student, and him and the Black student became friends, and he actually, they actually became friends and learned from each other, which is a beautiful thing. And so, but yeah, I was surprised to learn that there are still so many cities or small towns that still have segregation. Well, thank you all so much for being vulnerable. I'm gonna go back to sharing presentation, and so that's it. So all that to say that would appreciate you guys, being vulnerable and sharing. I wanted us to take a moment to actually understand what fostering belonging looks like, and to understand that belonging is within our DNA. It's within who we are as a humanity, as people, and that's the end. To realize that it is through belonging that we actually take the time to listen and hear other people's stories and experiences, and how much those can actually have impacts, not only on the person sharing their story, but on us as individuals. By actually taking the time to listen, we actually allow ourselves to learn something from someone else and to actually be able to change our narrative or our beliefs. We all have unconscious biases, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's actually taking the time to, okay, it's okay for me to change my mind. It's okay for me to change my mind a number of times, because it is through those interactions with other people we actually learn something about them that we may have perceived wrong, or something that we may have been told wrong, or experiences that may have shaped us from, something that happened, and then we have another experience, and so we're allowed to change our mind. And then also being vulnerable. I know vulnerability is like a bad word. It's hard for people to be vulnerable, but it's actually a very good thing. By being vulnerable and allowing ourselves to get comfortable being uncomfortable, we actually tell our story. We give other people permission to share their story, which is very important. It actually empowers them to say, hey, you know what, you shared your story, then I can come in and I can share mine as well. And so it's very important that we take time to listen, that's it, to others without, trying to come up with, something to say, but actually just truly listening. So I'm sure you are well aware, belonging includes diversity, equity, inclusion, and awareness. You can't have belonging without any of those attributes. I can tell you from my experience at OSU, that said, leading these efforts, I work with a diverse population of students from first generation to veterans, to of course, underrepresented and LGBTQ. Working with these students, that's it, we saw that, some of them were trying to find their community, or they didn't feel like they had one. And so something that I actually started last year was I started a Belonging in Ceat. That's a newsletter that we put out every month. I have students, they fill out a questionnaire, and then I take that questionnaire and actually form it into an article that we send out through email as well as on our social media. The purpose of that was to get students to tell us their story, why they chose Oklahoma State University, why they chose the major that they chose to go into, how the support system that they had, that's it, whether it was through family, faculty, and staff, but actually going and taking that information and telling their story. From me doing that, I have actually gotten so many students that have so many different backgrounds that are like, hey, I want to give you my story too. And so, of course, I have tons that I'm actually able to share, and that's it. And so I just want us to understand that belonging, it encompasses so many different people and so many different demographics. And so the Society of Human Resource Management showed that communities or organizations that created belonging had a 35% that outperformed their competitors. And Harvard Business Review said that they saw 50% increase in employee retention and a 75% decrease in in sick days. And so creating that belonging is very important. And we can do so much, whether it's our personal brand or our business brand or organizational brand, we can make a difference by creating belonging spaces, creating safe places, and then also bringing in these people with so many different demographics, backgrounds, histories, and cultures. We actually can create, those minds come together, make the most innovative things that we've ever seen. And so I would like to leave you with a question. What does your community need for belonging? And what can you do to create that? Are there any questions?
So Yokolanda,
Yes, Dawn.
hi. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So one thing about, Rotary is a wonderful organization, and I am not at all biased in saying that the Stillwater Frontier Rotary is an amazing club and probably one of the best out there, if not the best. However, one of the important things is we need to reflect the diversity of our communities. And so, I think that's hard for, I think it's hard to get people involved, who maybe don't automatically see themselves belonging in a group like our Rotary Club. We're constantly looking at, on a periodic basis, how many females do we have in the group? What is the average age of the group? But I'm also looking at, and I know a lot of other people are, what's the diversity of the group and how can we involve more people in what we do? So I don't know if it's really a question so much as it is an observation to say, over the next 20 years, I would love to see, and I know a lot of people would love to see Rotary really become more diverse and be more reflective of the communities that we work in.
No, I understand where you're coming from, but it's my guess, not that I know all of you here, but I'm sure that you all have very different, backgrounds as far as work experience, that's it, environmental demographics. And like you said, reviewing and seeing, okay, what women do we have, but also take the time to look and see the inner workings of, okay, what do each of you bring to the table regarding your experiences, your employment, previous backgrounds in that, way. And then I actually didn't really know much about your organization until just having a conversation with Terry. But I love to, be a part of organizations that are doing some beautiful things. And Terry has told me that you guys do some amazing things in the community. And so maybe doing some things to maybe, I think something I kind of seen with OSU in my position is sometimes we're not very good at bragging and telling about what all we do. And so getting that word out there and letting people know, hey, we create this, we create spaces, we actually do things for the community. And I know it's hard to brag on ourselves at times, but I think sometimes people don't know what you do. And so that can come off as a hindrance for not having those people want to come and join you because they don't know that what you do, or they don't know that you exist. So getting that conversation going, whichever way, whether it's through newspaper, social media, I think that would actually bring in some more diversity. And so I was loved when Terry told me about your program, and I was like, oh, this is great. This is wonderful. I'd love to, so I actually did a little research on you guys. And so I was like, wow, you guys are making some great impacts. But I just wish I would have known. And so I'm just interested in learning more, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. We would love to have you explore becoming a member. So
thank you. Thank you. Well, I just want to thank you all so much for your time today. That's allowing me to come into your afternoon and share a little bit about belonging, which is something I'm very passionate about. If you happen to have any questions, you can feel free to send me an email or follow me on social media at Ceat Inclusion, or my personal is Yokolanda Speight. But I really do appreciate your time. Oh, is there?
Yeah, Yokolanda, I was going to ask, because you are into consulting, it's like, do you have a special area within this broad topic that you like to work with? Or do you, I know you work with businesses and all kinds of organizations. I thought you might just expand on that a little bit.
Yes, that's it. So I actually, that's it, help organizations, that's it, by providing training for their employees so that they can actually create that sense of community. That's it, some organizations like to, that's it, maybe, you know, like new management comes in or they're wanting to incorporate a more inclusive culture. And so I actually do go through training. And of course, we have to start with upper leadership and that's it, and work our way down. But that's to actually provide cultural training or unconscious bias training. That's it for organizations in that capacity. It just kind of tailoring to whatever that organization would particularly need.
Yolanda, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
So, you know, it's been my observation that just that since Rotary is, I'm sort of following up on Don's observation. Your Rotary has a major social component to our activities in addition to all the other things we do. And so typically when we are bringing in new members, we typically do that because we've had a friendship or we've had an acquaintance or some sort of knowing something about that person. And, you know, my guess is that many of us, I don't want to use all, but probably many of us don't have a reasonably close acquaintance or relationship with, you know, someone of color. Now, there are certainly exceptions. You know, for example, in my case, being a former faculty member, I had students from all over the world working on research, and we became good friends, but they weren't really candidates for Rotary, mainly because of the financial situation and their inability, and plus the fact that, you know, they would be moving on shortly. I think in my experience, only one time did I have what I would call a close relationship with a Black person. And that sort of happened through the College of Engineering because he was on the staff working for Dean Carl Reed, who's on this call. And we became very good friends, went to dinner or lunch together every week. And he certainly would have been someone that had he still been in Stillwater, I would have invited because I knew him and knew something about him. But the opportunities, I guess, that I see in my career here, and I've been here 35 years, for forming that kind of relationship are difficult, very, very difficult. And so I'm just sort of asking, how do you address that? What would you have to say about that? If my situation is similar to many others, how would you go about addressing something like that?
Well, like you said, if your organization is built off of community and having connection first before you actually open for someone to be a part, then I would say, okay, then we need to see what ways can we partner with others. So if there is an organization in Stillwater that could utilize, that you could, you know, partner with in making an impact, and if that was a diverse community, I would actually see and reach out, okay, what ways can I impact the community in connection with another organization? And then from there, meeting with other people that said, you know, like you said, befriending, whether that's through those other organizations or through your own organization, if your job, whatever that may be, since you mentioned Dr. Hoberock, you know, making those connections in engineering, then from there, that's it, having those conversations and letting them know. And then maybe they may not have, but I don't know what your financial means is to be able to be a part of the membership. But that's it, you know, having those discussions and then letting that person decide if they're willing to put this in their budget. If they're seeing what you're doing and the impacts you're making, people are passionate about community. They're passionate about making a difference and wanting to have an impact. That's something I know I see with the people that I have connections with in my job. There's, you know, especially even this new generation coming up, they're wanting to really see, okay, how is this going to impact? How is this degree? How am I going to take this degree and go back to my organization or my community, and that's and be able to impact, you know, that's it, my family and those, you know, that I care about. And so letting people know about what you're doing, they will actually put aside resources. They will come up with ways because that is something they're passionate about. And those who are not, then they're not your people, and being okay with that. But there are people out there. And I know for me, I didn't even know that much about this organization, but we have to start by building relationships. And so partnering, I think, would be a great resource to begin to make those connections. But thank you so much for your question. That was a great question.
So I'd like to add to that just one topic that I think many people here could benefit from. There is actually a new type of youth exchange called New Generations, just like you said. And it's for people that are about the age that Dr. Hoberock was mentioning. So anywhere from 18 to 30. But the Rotary clubs involved actually do the sponsorship, just like in Youth Exchange. You will have host families, but it allows you to do some professional development, and they're limited to 6 months in length. But as long as you have a service component, you can literally go all over the world. So I'm just seeing that this kind of ties a lot of things together. And I know there's going to be members of the board that are aware, but so far our club is yet to do one. And I don't think that many other clubs have either, but it's still a great opportunity. And if Yoko knows about it and some of the engineering faculty knows about it and we get the word out, you might even see someone within your church or community that could benefit. And literally they can go anywhere. It's like the door is open. Where do you want to go? And basically for a very, very cheap price. You know, it's like the cost of airfare is what you're looking at. So just be aware.
Thank you for sharing that, Terry. I'm gonna have to look into that. I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, if you want any more information, you can look it up on Rotary International, or you can always give me a holler. Okay.
Thank you. We'll sure will do.
Okay, and before we let you go, Yokolanda, I actually had a question. I was wondering, you said that you grew up in Pawnee, which of course has strong ties to the tribal community of the Pawnee Nation. And I was wondering if you had experiences as you were growing up that sort of led to your choice of career, or and maybe an exclusion at the Pawnee Lake or something that influenced your work in any way.
That's it. Yes, that's it. So my grandmother is Pearl Abington. That's it. She's from Pawnee. So I spent a lot of time with, a lot of summers with my grandmother growing up. And that's it. And I know my grandmother had, you know, different positions with different people and backgrounds. My grandmother, worked, you know, sewing clothing at a factory. And then in the evening, she actually was, would go and clean up people's homes. And then she'd have a weekend job where she would actually go and do work at OSU. And so there was a lot of summers where I remember going to OSU and seeing this community of, you know, a college education. And then of course, seeing my mother go through and get her first, that's a degree. That's the one I did apply for a job a little over 15 years ago. It was at OSU in the College of Engineering. And it was actually as a secretary to begin with. Later, I was actually promoted to be an administrative assistant to their multicultural engineering programs, is what it was called at the time. And so I actually loved, you know, being able to have those student interactions. And I have to be honest, a lot of my biases, were addressed when I took that position. I mean, there were so many different things that I did not know. And so taking the time to educate myself on realizing that, you know, African-Americans, Native Americans, they can actually do an engineering degree. It's hard, it's rigorous, but we have resources to help support them. And so I know a lot of my own biases had to be addressed. From there, I actually, you know, just grew to love the connection I saw with the students in seeing them come in their freshman year or go through our summer bridge program, and then seeing them by their, you know, by the senior year and they're ready to graduate, make that trek, you know, that trek across that stage. It really impacted me to see, okay, they've got a job secure and they're going to be okay. So for me, my love language is service. So I actually love being able to give back. I love being able to have students in my office. Okay, you know, what is your problem? Okay, what resources can we figure out? Or having freshmen come in and they'll sit and tell me, you know, I don't really know what I want to major in. I know I want to do engineering. And then one of my questions I love to ask them is, if you were to become famous overnight, and what would the headline newspaper say about you? And so many of them will tell me, you know, I want to do research. I want to be known for this big thing. And I'm like, okay, then we need to get you connected with faculty so that you could actually start doing that research and gaining that experience. Or, you know, let's see if we can reach out to some companies and get you connected so you can get an internship. And so I just love being able to give service. And so that is the reason why I actually applied for this position a little over 2 years ago, and actually went and started going through training so that I could be equipped to be able to be my best self in serving others.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, if not, Yokolanda, we appreciate your discussion and insight with our group today. Stillwater Frontier Rotary supports literacy, and so we'll be donating a library book in your honor to the Stillwater Public Library. Thank you to any guests who may have joined us late. Please join us next week. Our program for February 25th is Doug Gottlieb going to join us via Zoom for discussion on sports, former Cowboy player, as you may recall. If there's nothing else, we'll adjourn with the four-way test. The four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. Number one, is it the truth?
Is it true?
Number two, is it fair to all concerned?
concerned?
Number three, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Number four, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you very much for everyone joining us today. We are adjourned.
Thank you all. I really appreciate your time today. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Travis.
Thank you, Yokolanda.